When Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome, he did not inherit peace. He inherited war, plague, betrayal, political pressure, and the weight of millions of lives depending on his judgment. Yet if you read his private journal, the words we now call Meditations, you will notice something unusual. He does not write like a man seeking comfort. He writes like a soldier sharpening his blade. Every sentence is a form of training. Every reflection is preparation for impact. Marcus Aurelius believed the mind must be trained long before life attacks, because once the battle begins, it is too late to prepare. As a young man, Marcus did not grow up dreaming of power. He was sickly, introspective, and unusually serious for his age. While others pursued pleasure, he pursued discipline. His mentors taught him rhetoric, logic, ethics, and endurance. But philosophy was not an academic exercise for him. It was survival training. He understood early that the greatest threats would not come from enemy armies alone, but from fear, ego, anger, desire, and despair rising inside his own mind. So he trained himself the way a general trains troops, relentlessly, daily, without applause. A Roman soldier drilled even when there was no war. He marched with full armor, practiced sword strikes against wooden posts heavier than real enemies, and repeated the same movements until they became instinct. Marcus applied the same logic to his inner life. He rehearsed loss before it happened. He imagined insult before it arrived. He practiced humility before power corrupted him. This is why he wrote reminders to himself like, "Do not act as if you will live 10,000 years, or you have power over your mind, not outside events." These were not poetic thoughts. They were commands, orders given to himself to remain battle-ready. Most people wait for chaos before they try to calm their mind. Marcus did the opposite. He trained calmness during order so it would remain intact during disorder. When the plague swept through Rome, killing soldiers and civilians alike, Marcus did not collapse inward. He wrote that death smiles at us all, and all a man can do is smile back. Not because he was cold, but because he had already faced death mentally 1,000 times before it stood in front of him. The soldier who has already imagined the battlefield does not panic when the arrows fly. Marcus Aurelius believed that weakness of mind was more dangerous than weakness of body. A tired body could still follow orders. A panicked mind could destroy an empire. That is why he returned again and again to the same mental drills. Wake up and remind yourself you will meet interference, ingratitude, arrogance, deceit. This was not pessimism, this was realism. He was inoculating himself against shock. Just as a soldier conditions his body to pain so it no longer surprises him, Marcus conditioned his mind to reality so it no longer overwhelmed him. What made his training brutal was that it offered no emotional escape. He denied himself self-pity. He denied himself excuses. When something went wrong, he did not ask, "Why me?" He asked, "What does this require of me now?" That question alone separates the civilian mind from the soldier mind. Civilians react, soldiers respond. Marcus trained himself to respond. At night, while camped near hostile borders surrounded by war, he wrote by candlelight not to impress history, but to correct himself. He scolded his own laziness. He reminded himself to serve without bitterness. He warned himself not to become cruel just because others were unjust. This is mental discipline at its highest level. Power did not exempt him from training. Power demanded more of it. The Stoics believed life is a battlefield where the real war is internal. Marcus accepted this fully. He knew that if anger controlled him, enemies would not need to defeat Rome. He would defeat it himself through poor judgment. If pleasure softened him, hardship would break him. If praise intoxicated him, criticism would destroy him. So he lived like a man always under inspection, not by others, but by his own conscience. This is why his mind became unshakable, not because he was born strong, but because he practiced strength. Every day he asked himself if this moment tested his patience, his courage, his discipline, or his sense of justice. And every day he answered not with words, but with action, like a soldier standing his post even when no one is watching. When you understand this, you realize Marcus Aurelius did not write Meditations for comfort. He wrote it to stay sharp, to stay awake, to stay human in a world that constantly pressures leaders to become monsters. His philosophy was armor, his thoughts were weapons, and his calm was not passive. It was trained. Marcus Aurelius understood something most people never realize. The mind, if left untrained, will betray you at the exact moment you need it most. Comfort weakens awareness. Ease dulls judgment. This is why he refused to live mentally soft, even when his position allowed him every luxury Rome could offer. Instead of indulging, he practiced voluntary hardship. He reminded himself that he could live with less, endure more, and still remain whole. This was not self-punishment, it was mental conditioning. A soldier does not wait until hunger arrives to test his endurance. He fasts during training so hunger will not control him in war. Marcus applied this principle internally. He practiced accepting discomfort before discomfort was forced upon him. Cold mornings, plain food, simple clothing, and a strict routine were his way of telling his mind, "You are not in charge, I am." Desire was treated like a wild horse that had to be trained before it could be ridden. One of his most powerful disciplines was learning to separate events from judgments. To an untrained mind, an insult feels like an attack. A delay feels like disrespect. Loss feels like injustice. Marcus trained himself to pause between what happens and what he tells himself about what happens. In that pause lived his freedom. He reminded himself that things themselves do not disturb us, only our opinions about them. This was not theory. On campaign, delays could mean death. Insults could provoke violence. Loss could shatter morale. His ability to remain internally still gave him clarity while others lost control. Marcus believed that emotions are not enemies, but they must never be commanders. Fear could inform him, but it could not lead him. Anger could signal injustice, but it could not decide his response. Pleasure could be enjoyed, but never depended on. This emotional hierarchy is identical to military command structure. Information flows upward, decisions flow downward. When emotions overrule reason, the chain of command collapses. He also trained his mind to accept the temporary nature of everything. Soldiers know that victory fades and defeat passes. Marcus extended this awareness to life itself. Fame, power, health, relationships, even the empire he ruled were already marked for disappearance in his mind. By accepting this, he removed their power to destabilize him. When something is borrowed, you do not rage when it is taken back, you return it. This perspective made him immune to both flattery and despair. Praise did not inflate him because it would vanish. Criticism did not break him because it too would vanish. This balance is rare, especially among rulers. Most are destroyed by one or the other. Marcus trained himself to stand in the middle, grounded, observant, alert. Another aspect of his mental training was moral vigilance. He constantly warned himself not to become what he despised. Power invites corruption quietly. It does not arrive announcing itself. It arrives disguised as necessity, convenience, and efficiency. Marcus wrote reminders to himself not to trade justice for speed, not to trade kindness for control, not to trade truth for advantage. These were his rules of engagement. In war, a soldier who violates discipline endangers everyone. Marcus believed the same was true for moral failures. A small compromise today becomes a habit tomorrow. A habit becomes a character becomes destiny. So he treated ethics as operational law, not personal preference. Even exhaustion was part of his training. He wrote to himself while sick, grieving, overwhelmed, and isolated. Instead of asking for relief, he asked for alignment. Am I acting according to nature? Am I serving the common good? Am I allowing externals to dictate my inner state? These questions grounded him when sleep and strength failed. By training his mind this way, Marcus Aurelius created an inner fortress. Enemies could surround him, chaos could rage, illness could weaken his body, but his judgment remained intact, and for him, that was the true victory. Marcus Aurelius knew that the greatest battlefield is the present moment, not the future, not the past, but the single breath where choice still exists. A soldier cannot fight yesterday's battle or tomorrow's fear. He fights where his feet are planted. Marcus trained his attention to stay here because distraction is a form of weakness. A wandering mind cannot hold a line. He warned himself constantly not to live as if distracted by noise, gossip, or imagined futures. Every time the mind drifts, discipline erodes. Every time discipline erodes, reaction replaces reason. This is why he returned again and again to simplicity. Do what is in front of you. Do it well. Do it justly. Do it without complaint. This was his drill, repeated until it became instinct. Unlike modern motivation, Marcus did not hype himself with grand visions. He grounded himself in duty. He believed purpose is not something you chase emotionally. It is something you fulfill practically. Just as a soldier does not ask if he feels inspired to stand watch, Marcus did not ask if he felt motivated to act rightly. He acted because it was required. Feeling followed action, not the other way around. He also trained himself to see other people clearly, not as enemies, not as obstacles, but as fellow humans acting from ignorance, fear, or habit. This perspective disarmed resentment. When someone acted unjustly, Marcus reminded himself that they were mistaken, not malicious by nature. This did not mean tolerating harm. It meant responding without hatred. Hatred clouds judgment, and clouded judgment costs lives. This ability to depersonalize conflict was critical for leadership. A soldier who takes every blow personally loses focus. Marcus refused to let insult penetrate his core. He treated it like noise on the battlefield, not ignored, but filtered. Useful information stayed. Emotional poison was discarded. He also practiced constant self-interrogation, not in a neurotic way, but in a disciplined way. Did I act with integrity today? Did I speak unnecessarily? Did I allow comfort to weaken my resolve? Did I waste time that was not mine to waste? This daily review functioned like an after-action report. Learn, adjust, improve. No self-praise, no self-hatred, just accuracy. Marcus understood that the mind resists discipline at first. It seeks excuses, it demands ease, it whispers that tomorrow is enough. He treated these thoughts, a commander treats insubordination, firmly and without debate. Stand up, do the work, remain steady. This was not cruelty, it was leadership directed inward. One of his strongest beliefs was that you become what you repeatedly practice. If you practice complaining, you become fragile. If you practice gratitude, you become resilient. If you practice self-control, you become free. He knew that habits are the real architects of character, and character decides fate more reliably than circumstance. This is why he did not wait for ideal conditions. There are none. War taught him that. Illness taught him that. Politics taught him that. So he trained his mind to operate under pressure, not in its absence. Calm was not something he hoped for. It was something he enforced internally. Marcus Aurelius was not trying to be remembered as a philosopher. He was trying to survive ethically in an environment that rewarded cruelty. He was trying to rule without losing his soul. That is why his discipline was severe. That is why his tone is demanding. And that is why his words still feel like commands rather than comfort. Marcus Aurelius believed that if your mind is not governed by principle, it will be governed by impulse. And impulse, under pressure, always chooses the easiest path, not the right one. This is why he treated reason as a commanding officer. It was not a passive advisor. It issued orders that had to be followed, especially when emotions protested. He constantly reminded himself that nature had given him the capacity to think clearly, to choose restraint, and to act justly. To ignore that capacity was not weakness, it was disobedience. In his view, every time you surrender to rage or despair, you are abandoning your post. And abandonment, whether on a battlefield or in life, has consequences. Marcus trained himself to endure misunderstanding without bitterness. As emperor, he was criticized by senators, doubted by generals, and resented by citizens who had never met him. Most leaders retaliate. Marcus reflected. He asked whether the criticism was true. If it was, he corrected himself. If it was false, he let it pass. Either way, he refused to let it disturb his inner order. This restraint preserved his energy for what mattered. He also trained himself to accept solitude. Many rulers fear being alone with their thoughts. Marcus welcomed it. Solitude was where he sharpened his discipline, where he removed mental clutter, where he returned to first principles. A soldier cleans his weapon after battle. Marcus cleaned his mind. Pain for him was information, not a verdict. Physical pain, emotional pain, political pain were signals to be acknowledged, not identities to be worn. He refused to dramatize suffering, not because it was insignificant, but because exaggeration multiplies pain unnecessarily. He would say to himself, "This is what the moment requires, nothing more. Endure it with dignity." He believed that complaining was a form of surrender, not because it expressed feeling, but because it implied resistance to reality. Reality does not negotiate. A soldier does not argue with terrain. He adapts. Marcus adapted internally before demanding change externally. This gave him resilience without passivity. One of his most difficult disciplines was compassion without attachment. He served people knowing many would never appreciate it. He helped those who might betray him later. He accepted this as the cost of duty. Expecting gratitude, in his view, was like expecting a sword to thank you for wielding it. Service was its own reward. He also reminded himself that every day could be his last, not as a threat, but as a focusing tool. When time is limited, trivial concerns fall away. Vanity loses its grip. Procrastination becomes irrational. This awareness sharpened his priorities and stripped his actions of excess. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind to remain upright even when everything around him leaned toward decay. He did not confuse endurance with numbness. He felt deeply. But feeling never replaced thinking. Emotion never replaced virtue. This balance made him rare. He understood that strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It simply holds steady. Like a soldier standing guard in the dark, unseen but essential. Marcus Aurelius knew that discipline must continue even when motivation disappears. Motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls with mood, health, and circumstance. Discipline remains when everything else collapses. This is why he did not build his inner life on inspiration. He built it on obligation. Obligation to reason. Obligation to justice. Obligation to the role he had been given by fate. He reminded himself that you do not choose your assignments in life, only how you carry them out. He did not choose to rule during war and plague. He did not choose betrayal from trusted allies. He did not choose illness that weakened his body year after year, but he chose how to meet these conditions internally. And that choice was trained daily. Marcus saw excuses as the enemy of character. Every excuse weakens the will. Every rationalization trains the mind to retreat. So when his body was tired, he reminded himself that the work of a human being is not optional. When his mind resisted effort, he told himself that nature demands participation, not comfort. This self-talk was not gentle. It was precise, like orders issued before battle. He believed that endurance is not about enduring everything forever. It is about enduring what must be endured without corruption of the soul. A soldier may retreat strategically, but he never abandons his values. Marcus applied this principle relentlessly. He adjusted tactics, not principles. He compromised on convenience, never on virtue. One of the hardest lessons he trained into himself was accepting limits. Even as emperor, he could not control outcomes. He could only control intention and effort. This acceptance prevented despair. When a campaign failed, he did not collapse into self-hatred. When success came, he did not indulge pride. He remained anchored to what was within his command. Marcus also trained himself to speak little and act more. Excess speech weakens authority. Excess explanation invites doubt. He preferred clarity through action. This restraint extended inward as well. He did not argue endlessly with his own mind. He identified the right action and executed it. Doubt was acknowledged, not entertained. He treated time as sacred. Wasted time was wasted life. He reminded himself that every moment lost to distraction was a moment stolen from service. This awareness sharpened his focus. He did not rush, but he did not drift. There is a difference. One is panic, the other is decay. He also understood that the mind mirrors its inputs. What you dwell on shapes what you become. So he avoided mental indulgence in resentment, fantasy, and comparison. These thoughts weaken resolve. They dissolve presence. He returned instead to what is necessary, what is just, what is now. By training his mind this way, Marcus Aurelius became internally self-sufficient. He did not need constant reassurance. He did not need applause. He did not need certainty. He needed alignment. And alignment, once established, carried him through uncertainty with steadiness. This is the mark of a soldier mind, not loud, not aggressive, but unwavering. Marcus Aurelius understood that control is not domination, it is self-command. Many rulers try to control the world and fail. Marcus focused on ruling the one territory he could never afford to lose, his own mind. This is why his philosophy feels severe. It demands responsibility where excuses are most tempting. He trained himself to distinguish between what is necessary and what is noise. News, rumors, opinions, praise, blame, all of it passed through him without settling. A soldier cannot react to every sound on the battlefield. He learns to recognize what matters. Marcus did the same internally. Attention was his most guarded resource. He believed that inner disorder inevitably becomes outer disorder. A confused mind produces confused decisions. A restless mind spreads unrest. So he returned constantly to order within. When he felt irritation rising, he did not express it, he examined it. What belief is creating this reaction? Is it accurate? Is it useful? This process disarmed emotional escalation before it reached behavior. Marcus also trained himself to accept that people will not act as you wish. Expecting otherwise is ignorance. This acceptance freed him from constant frustration. He did not waste energy trying to reform human nature. He focused on fulfilling his role regardless of others. A soldier does not wait for ideal comrades to perform his duty. He warned himself against mental laziness. Comfort in thought is just as dangerous as comfort in action. Repeating unexamined beliefs, adopting popular opinions, or avoiding difficult truths weakens judgment. So he questioned his own assumptions, even the ones that felt good, especially the ones that felt good. One of his deepest disciplines was gratitude without dependence. He appreciated what life offered without clinging to it. This allowed him to enjoy without fear, to lose without collapse. Attachment creates vulnerability. Appreciation creates strength. This distinction guided his emotional balance. Marcus also trained his mind to see adverse as raw material. Just as resistance strengthens muscle, difficulty strengthens character when used correctly. He did not romanticize suffering. He used it. Every obstacle was a test. Every setback was a drill. Every loss was instruction. He believed that dignity is maintained not by circumstance, but by response. You cannot choose what happens, but you can choose whether you remain upright. This belief anchored him through humiliation, grief, and failure. He refused to be lowered by events. Even in moments of exhaustion, he reminded himself that the work of justice does not pause for personal comfort. He did not expect ease, he expected effort. This expectation protected him from disappointment. When life is hard but you expected hardness, stability remains. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind like a soldier because he understood that life does not announce its attacks. It strikes without warning. And only the prepared mind can meet chaos without becoming it. Marcus Aurelius believed that endurance without clarity becomes stubbornness, and clarity without endurance becomes weakness. So he trained both together. His mind was not rigid. It was resilient. It could bend without breaking, adapt without losing form. This balance is what allowed him to survive pressures that would have crushed a lesser character. He reminded himself that emotions are temporary weather patterns, not permanent truths. Anger rises, peaks, and fades. Fear does the same. Pleasure too. But reason, if maintained, remains stable beneath them. A soldier does not curse the storm, he adjusts his footing. Marcus adjusted internally instead of demanding that life adjust to him. He also trained himself to act without resentment. Resentment drains strength silently. It consumes energy while pretending to protect dignity. Marcus saw through this illusion. He understood that holding resentment is like carrying extra weight into battle. It does not harm the enemy. It harms the one who carries it. One of his hardest internal battles was against impatience. The desire for outcomes now, recognition now, resolution now. He reminded himself that nature operates on its own timeline. Seeds do not grow faster because you are in a hurry. Campaigns do not succeed because you demand quick victory. He learned to respect process, to work without rushing the result. He also trained himself to confront fear directly, not dramatically but honestly. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. He did not suppress these fears, he examined them. What exactly am I afraid of? Is it within my control? Does it threaten my character, or only my comfort? This analysis reduced fear to its actual size. Marcus believed that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey it. Fear could speak, it could advise, but it could not command. This internal hierarchy preserved his agency under pressure. He warned himself repeatedly not to seek refuge in distraction. Entertainment, gossip, indulgence were easy escapes from responsibility. Marcus saw them as desertion from the present moment. He chose engagement instead, even when engagement was painful, especially when it was painful. He also trained himself to forgive quickly, not for moral superiority, but for efficiency. Holding grudges consumes mental space. A clear mind is a lethal advantage. He released offenses the way a soldier drops unnecessary gear. Lightness increases mobility. Marcus Aurelius did not believe life owed him peace. He believed peace was earned through discipline, through alignment between thought and action, through consistency between values and behavior. This is why his calm feels earned, not naive. By the end of his life, weakened by illness, burdened by endless war, he remained internally composed. Not because suffering stopped, but because his mind was trained to meet it. He did not win every battle, but he never surrendered command of himself. Marcus Aurelius understood that identity is forged under pressure, not discovered in comfort. When life squeezes you, whatever emerges was already there. That is why he welcomed difficulty as a revealer, not because he enjoyed hardship, but because it showed him where discipline still needed strengthening. A soldier does not fear drills, he fears being unprepared. He trained himself to stop asking whether something was fair and start asking whether it was useful for virtue. Fairness is outside your command, your response is not. This shift removed a massive source of frustration. Many people break not because life is cruel, but because they demand it be different. Marcus refused this demand. Acceptance gave him leverage. He also trained himself to remember how small one life is in the scale of time. Empires rise and fall. Names are forgotten. Even Rome would fade. This was not nihilism, it was humility. Knowing his smallness freed him from ego. Free from ego, his judgment became clearer. A soldier who believes he is the center of the war makes reckless decisions. Marcus believed that discipline must be renewed daily. Yesterday's strength does not guarantee today's clarity. So every morning he began again, reminding himself who he was meant to be, what mattered, what did not. This repetition was not weakness, it was maintenance, just as armor must be checked before every march. He also trained himself to accept responsibility without self-cruelty. When he failed, he corrected course. He did not indulge shame. Shame paralyzes, responsibility mobilizes. This distinction kept him effective even when mistakes were costly. He understood that leadership begins with example. If he allowed himself luxury, others woo. LD decay. If he allowed himself anger, others would imitate it. So he held himself to a higher standard. Not for praise, but for stability. A disciplined leader stabilizes the entire structure beneath him. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind like a soldier because he knew peace is fragile, civilization is fragile, reason is fragile. Without constant effort, chaos returns. His philosophy was not abstract wisdom, it was a defense system against inner collapse. And that is why his words still cut through centuries. They are not comforting thoughts. They are training instructions, written by a man who knew that the mind, if not commanded, will rebel, and rebellion within is far more dangerous than any enemy outside. Marcus Aurelius never believed that wisdom arrived fully formed. He believed it was carved slowly through repetition, resistance, and restraint. This is why he returned to the same truths again and again. Not because he forgot them, but because the mind drifts under pressure. Repetition was his anchor. Each reminder pulled him back into alignment when emotion or fatigue tried to pull him off course. He understood that the mind naturally seeks comfort, approval, and certainty, but leadership demands the opposite. It demands discomfort, isolation, and doubt. So he trained himself to remain steady when reassurance was absent, when praise disappeared, when outcomes were unclear. He learned to operate without emotional guarantees. This is one of the hardest disciplines a human can master. Marcus saw clarity as something fragile. It had to be protected aggressively. He guarded it from anger because anger narrows perception. He guarded it from desire because desire distorts priorities. He guarded it from fear because fear exaggerates threats. Every emotion was evaluated based on one question only. Does this help me act justly right now? If not, it was set aside. He also trained himself to accept the loneliness of responsibility. Decisions made at the top are often misunderstood below. Marcus accepted this without resentment. He knew that waiting for universal understanding would paralyze action. A soldier cannot pause mid-battle to explain strategy. He must act, then accept the consequences. This acceptance gave him decisiveness without cruelty. He did not hesitate when action was required, but he also did not harden himself emotionally. He remained aware that every decision affected real lives. This tension between firmness and humanity defined his character. He never escaped it. He carried it. Marcus believed that impatience is a form of arrogance. It assumes the world should move at your speed. He trained himself to respect time, not waste it, not rush it, just respect it. He worked steadily, knowing that real progress often looks invisible in the moment. He also disciplined his imagination. An undisciplined imagination creates unnecessary suffering. It invents future disasters. It relives past mistakes endlessly. Marcus brought his imagination back under command. He focused it on what was present, actionable, and real. Everything else was treated as distraction. One of his most powerful practices was reminding himself that no situation is unique. Others before him had suffered, ruled, failed, endured. This historical perspective removed self-importance from pain. He was not special in his suffering, and that made suffering lighter. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to face moral fatigue. Doing the right thing repeatedly without recognition exhausts the spirit. He felt this exhaustion deeply, but he did not allow it to justify deviation. He reminded himself that virtue is not transactional. It does not demand reward. It fulfills its own purpose. He also practiced internal silence. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every impulse deserves response. Silence allowed wisdom to surface. In that silence he found stability. He understood that discipline is invisible. No one applauds inner restraint. No one sees a temptation resisted. No one notices a reaction that never happened. Yet this invisible discipline shapes everything visible. Empires rise or fall based on choices no one ever witnesses. Marcus Aurelius lived with the awareness that every day tested whether he would remain aligned or drift. He did not expect perfection. He expected effort, and effort, sustained over time, became character. This is why his philosophy endures, not because it promises happiness, but because it trains strength. Strength that does not depend on mood, strength that does not collapse under pressure, strength that holds steady when life offers no comfort at all. Marcus Aurelius understood that the final test of discipline is consistency when no one is watching. Power exposes character, but solitude reveals it. When the noise fades and the audience disappears, the mind either holds its structure or collapses into indulgence. Marcus trained for that silence. He did not rely on external order to keep him upright. He built internal order that remained even in isolation. He reminded himself that the soul becomes stained not by events, but by the way it responds to events. Violence does not only exist on battlefields, it exists in impatience, cruelty of speech, indifference to others, and self-deception. Marcus treated these subtle corruptions as seriously as open injustice. A soldier knows that small breaches collapse entire defenses. He trained himself to move through success with the same discipline he used in failure. Victory is more dangerous than defeat. Defeat humbles, victory inflates. Marcus watched himself closely during moments of praise and accomplishment. Was pride entering? Was complacency forming? Was effort declining? He corrected immediately. Stability mattered more than triumph. He also prepared his mind for betrayal without cynicism. He knew people would disappoint him. Some would act against shared values. Some would choose self-interest over duty. He accepted this as part of human nature, not as a personal wound. This prevented bitterness. Bitterness weakens judgment and poisons leadership. Marcus believed that reason must be renewed constantly because pressure erodes it quietly. Stress does not break the mind all at once. It wears it down through repetition. So he treated rest, reflection, and mental order as strategic necessities, not luxuries. Even soldiers retreat to regroup. Discipline includes recovery. He trained himself to recognize when suffering came from reality and when it came from resistance. Reality pain is unavoidable. Resistance pain is optional. By removing resistance, he reduced suffering without reducing effort. This distinction gave him endurance without despair. He also trained his sense of justice to remain flexible but unbroken. Justice required firmness, but also context. Punishment without understanding becomes cruelty. Mercy without standards becomes weakness. Marcus walked this line carefully. He adjusted responses without abandoning principles. He believed that the highest form of strength is self-restraint in moments of power. When retaliation was possible, he paused. When domination was easy, he chose fairness. These choices were not weakness, they were proof of command. Only those who rule themselves can rule others without corruption. Marcus Aurelius trained his mind to accept that legacy is not controlled by intention. You act rightly because it is right, not because it will be remembered. History may misunderstand you, it may forget you. That does not change your duty. This freed him from image management and allowed him to focus on substance. As his life moved toward its end, weakened and worn, his discipline did not soften. It clarified. The unnecessary fell away. Only essentials remained. Act justly, speak truthfully, accept what comes. Do not betray yourself. This is what it means to train the mind like a soldier, not aggression, not hardness, but unwavering alignment under pressure. A readiness that does not depend on circumstances, a calm that has been earned. Marcus Aurelius knew that the ultimate victory is mastery over oneself. All external triumphs, all accolades, all empires gained or lost, pale in comparison to the quiet command of your own mind. He trained himself daily because he understood that a single lapse in judgment can undo a lifetime of virtue. Like a soldier who checks his armor, sharpens his sword, and rehearses every maneuver before battle, he checked his thoughts, examined his impulses, and rehearsed virtue in every moment. He understood that death is the final test of discipline, not just the physical end, but the awareness that everything we build, every relationship, every title, every plan, will vanish. This awareness did not paralyze him, it focused him. Just as a soldier fights harder knowing the stakes, Marcus lived fully present because he knew life is finite and only a mind trained can meet its end with dignity. He trained himself to see obstacles as allies in disguise. Adversity revealed weaknesses that comfort would hide. Betrayal, loss, illness, and war became drills in patience, courage, and wisdom. Every difficulty sharpened the mind, tempered the spirit, and reinforced the discipline that would hold him steady when everything else crumbled. A soldier uses resistance to grow stronger. Marcus used life itself the same way. Marcus Aurelius disciplined his emotions to serve reason, not dominate it. Fear, anger, desire, and greed were not suppressed but directed. He acknowledged them, understood their origin, and then chose his response. A soldier does not throw away fear, he channels it to sharpen awareness. In the same way, Marcus transformed inner turmoil into strategic insight, ensuring that every action aligned with virtue. He trained himself to act ethically even when unseen, even when unrewarded. Recognition was never the goal, alignment with truth and justice was. Discipline without witness is the truest form of strength. Like a soldier standing guard in silence, the value is in steadfastness, not applause. His internal command became unshakable because it depended on no one's judgment but his own. Even in power, he avoided indulgence. Luxury, ease, and flattery were traps. Marcus remained vigilant, constantly reminding himself that authority does not justify compromise. The moment you allow comfort to outweigh duty, the mind softens and control slips. Discipline for him was a continual guard against subtle erosion of character. He embraced solitude and reflection as tools of mental fortification. Silence allowed him to distinguish between necessity and distraction, truth and opinion, impulse and reason. A soldier uses downtime to maintain readiness. Marcus used thought to maintain clarity. This is why his journal, written for himself alone, contains insights so precise, so commanding. They are the product of constant internal rehearsal. He trained himself to meet uncertainty without panic. Life offers no guarantees, no safety net. By anticipating unpredictability mentally, rehearsing responses, and grounding himself in virtue, he created stability where chaos threatened. A soldier who practices for the worst survives the unexpected. Marcus survived life itself the same way. In every reflection, he returned to the same principle: control yourself, act justly, accept what is outside your power, and remain steadfast. The world may rage, others may fail, pain may strike, praise may inflate, yet the trained mind endures, ready to meet whatever comes with clarity and integrity. This was the essence of his philosophy. This was the essence of his soldier-like discipline. By the end of his life, Marcus Aurelius had mastered not just rulership, but existence itself. His mind was an unbreachable fortress, tempered by adversity, sharpened by reflection, and aligned with reason. Training his mind like a soldier allowed him to face everything external calmly, act ethically without hesitation, and remain internally free when all around him demanded surrender. In his life and writings, he leaves us a timeless example. Strength is not inherited, it is practiced, and the battlefield of the mind is where true victory is won.